Today, I am wearing my new HackerNoon shirt that came in the mail yesterday. It's soft, it's unwashed, it's great, and I put it on this morning, and I just thought to myself, I never thought that I would drink corporate Kool-Aid again, but here we are, putting it on the shirt, doing it, and what better way to launch this podcast than to talk about HackerNoon and how we got started with this company. So David and Storm, welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for coming on. Of course, this is the HackerNoon Podcast, and my name is Amy Tom. David, I would love to ask you some questions about how you started HackerNoon. And so to give the listeners some background as well, I think I started here maybe like 7-ish months ago at this point, maybe 8, no, maybe 7. And so David, when did you start working at HackerNoon?
Well, HackerNoon started as a side project. I was just left this company called Smart Recruiters and saw it go from like 5 to 100 people, and was ready to have a site that made money while I slept, and was ready to be done with bosses in general, except my customers and writers. And so I was just building a bunch of sites, trying to figure out what would grow. And HackerNoon's the one that like kind of hit the spot of just a sweet spot between readers, writers, and a cool place to spend time on the internet. Technologists in general understand they need to talk about their work. Blogging is something that's very good for their profession and gets them more users. So having our model of the contributor owns the content and we bring editing and distribution, that's something I could do and knew how to do. And that model fit really well with technology. And it took, I think I was building it for maybe 15 months before we got our first paying customer. Then we started to become good enough that like, first paying customer was actually hired.com. There's a free plug right there. They bought the whole site, did a site-wide takeover for some time, and bought our emails. Then it became enough of a money-making machine for me to recruit Ling, who's my wife, who's much more talented than me, and it was enough for 2 jobs and not just one. So that was really good.
Wait, okay, I have some questions.
Yeah.
When did you start?
So HackerNoon.com, 2016.
2016. Okay, and then when you say we at the beginning, who was we?
Oh, so mostly me, but also my friend Jay Zalowitz, who built some original scripts to ask writers to bring their content here. And he's an engineer at the time. Most recently he was at Sonder, but he's been an engineer at Capital One, a couple different places. It was just really over beers. I was just, because I had this 1-room office where I was serving marketing clients. It was called the Flood Building at Market and Fourth in San Francisco. So I kind of had a little bit of a hub of like people just come here and like work on whatever, even though it was like super tiny, this little like room in San Francisco. Yeah, so a lot. And then, he never was full-time on the project. He was always part-time and has a small stake in it. And, he's building his own company now, I think. That seems to be a trend. When you leave HackerNoon, you build your own company. And I always feel like much better when people do that. I get like slightly annoyed when they leave and they join a different company. But if they're starting a new company, I'm like, all right, you have at it. How can I help?
Play.
Like, yeah, like I want these alumni to like build something bigger than me. Like that would be a cool spot to be in.
Okay, and then Ling was your first employee. When did she join?
2017.
Okay, so 1 year later, and now we're in 2021. And Storm, when did you join?
So I joined at the height of excitement when HackerNoon were leaving Medium.com and had been building their own platform and were about to launch it. So it was a very exciting time for everyone. And I am historically a full stack developer and actually joined with the mind of doing something other than development. So I quite fancied my hand at writing and thought maybe I could fare as an editor for a time with HackerNoon. So that was my first gig with them. But it didn't last too long, a few months before my itchy fingers couldn't stay away from the code anymore. And offered to work on a side project that was launching at the same time, more or less, I think, as HackerNoon.com, which was the Noonies, the first greenest awards for HackerNoon, which was a very interesting project. And I think we've spoken about that on a previous podcast, David.
Yeah. So this is your second podcast episode, right? Yes.
It is. Yeah, it is.
And when was the Noonies launched? Was that 2018, 2019?
2019 was the first
2019.
Noonies. Yeah, that was around June, I think, or June or July was the first Noonies.
Yep, and it was the voting software. And Amy, you started as an editor too, right?
Yes. I started as a part-time editor. Yeah, everybody started as an editor.
Right? You just put all new employees in the trenches and see how they fare.
And then find something that they're really good at.
They find their way. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now you're a podcast host and you're a full stack developer. And I remember we were like scouring. We wanted to do these awards to like recognize the community and get writers have a say and like assign some awards and just have more like interaction on the site. And voting is a really good way to do that and hits with our kind of community driven editorial line because the community is actually deciding who wins the award. And we looked at all these softwares on the market and they were so expensive. And it was like, and they didn't fit our use case. And Storm was like, I can just build that. That's like not that hard.
Yeah, super fun.
All right. Yeah. Okay, great. David, is this your first entrepreneurial venture?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I sold t-shirts on eBay when eBay was invented. I was like 12.
Okay.
I'd go to the thrift store, I would get t-shirts. I'd list them on eBay and I would try and sell them. It was, if it sold, you made money, but it was like, you'd do a lot of listings for like no bids. And it's like, oh, this isn't worth it. I think I was
going to say at 12, how did you know what kind of hot t-shirts were in?
I think I was just going off like the fancy logos of the shirts. Okay. So if it was like Ralph Lauren at the time, Ralph Lauren or like Lacoste or something, like a brand that I actually recognize. This is in like rural Pennsylvania. The thrift stores are loaded with like, you know, baseball teams and softball teams and like just like printed local shirts. Like there wasn't too many like brand overload.
Okay. Storm, what was your first job?
Well, my first entrepreneurial experience was selling perfume online.
Oh, okay.
I think back in the early days of the web as well. I guess it must have been 2005 or so. I started a website where I found a supplier of perfumes and managed to sell them for cheaper. And that was my first trip into the entrepreneurial world. And I guess I've always had the itch as well. I've started several small ideas since then. And I actually have a question for David here, which would be, have you ever had a normal job?
Yeah. I mean, I was a newspaper reporter for a little bit but that only lasted like 8 months. I had some physical labor jobs, night shift, moving stacks of newspapers. So those were normal jobs. And then the Smart Recruiters one was mostly normal, but like, it was kind of bizarre because I was the first American and it was like this French guy came to San Francisco to start a bigger company than his last one. So he like didn't really need the money, but he like wanted like just the growth and the fame and the recognition, as well as just a little bit addicted to the work. You know, you start to meet these entrepreneurs and it starts to like, at some level, it just has nothing to do with money at all. It's just like, I want the thing to work the way I want it to work. And I want people to talk about it the way I want them to talk about it. And it's like, the ego's just blowing up, you know, and it has nothing to do with the money, even though the money is like, at the end of the day, without it, there's no business. So I think my job now is pretty normal, right? You know, edit, sponsor, wireframe, podcast. That seems pretty normal.
I don't think anyone working for HackerNoon would agree with that.
I was just going to say that. I'm like, I don't think I would describe this as normal. I love it, but I don't think I would describe this as normal.
HackerNoon's like the wild west of startups. We just, kind of anything goes, really. I mean, you only have to just look at how the website has changed and the various campaigns that we've done, you know, over the years, just to see how much of a playground it is for us. And amazingly still serving so many people.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's go.
Playground. Go ahead.
Yeah. let's go timeline. So we started in 2016. Ling joined in 2017. We moved off of Medium in 2019.
Mm-hmm. And
Okay.
in 2018, the end of 2018, we raised $1 million from our readers to do the move and build a software team. And then in 2021, we became profitable again, which is nice.
Yay. Okay, so let's talk about the funding campaign that you did. Why did you choose to do it the way that you did?
I didn't really know what I was going to do next at the time. So they told me I can't run ads on my site anymore, even though like they had an ad on every single site and pop-ups on my site all over the place. So I was like, you're running ads. Can't I run ads too? So we hit this spot of they just didn't want me around, which was frustrating because I was like just when it was starting to grow. It went from 1 job to 2 jobs. The thing was growing in demand more. Like, so it was a frustrating like experience. But with crowdfunding specifically, it just aligned our incentives a lot more, for businesses that are very community driven, and have a large audience, but not large revenue. Crowdfunding makes a lot of sense because now they're saying, hey, the community's investing, taking ownership of it. And if it grows, they reap the rewards of it. And then you also have this marketing army of 1,200 people that believe this site should be bigger, and they'll refer us customers and candidates and say HackerNoon is good. And we have this dedicated 1,000 fans, 1,200 fans. So, and it really came about from our HackerNoon contributor himself. So the Start Engine CEO, Howard Marks, he had published probably 40, 50 posts at the time on HackerNoon. So it was like I was literally his editor reading his stories about the crowdfunding, and the whole ICO scene had just like kind of popped. Like it went crazy 2017, 2018, and then 2018 people start to realize, oh shit, most of these are scams. And so I really working at Smart Recruiters changed my perspective on equity and how important it is. I mean, that's how I got my down payment on my house, being an early employee there. So like the idea that you can take a little less money up front, but you get a stake of ownership was something that resonated with me. And I think every single person, should value equity. So that taught me, something, some level of value of just like, what is a good way to raise money. And also the venture capitalists we talked to at the time, I didn't talk to many because the first couple of discussions were all kind of the same. Like, David, we don't know if you can build a platform. And I'm like, okay, well, look at this community. And they're like, well, we don't know if you can do the software. It's like, well, I think I can. We don't know if you can. No one really knew. So it's just the leverage of it's a very good thing. If entrepreneurs are capable of have the demand, like setting your own terms is a really good thing. I'm really thrilled that I could keep HackerNoon as an entirely common stock company, no preferred shares, every share is equal. And that idea really appealed to me about how to grow a company fairly.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree with that. Sorry, Amy. I just want to say I completely agree with that. And I think that it's a place where a lot of startups fall short, especially very young startups, in that they're not really distributing the invested interest very well among, never mind their users, but their actual employees as well. And as a good example of this, I think recently there is a digital bank in Europe called Bank from the Netherlands, and they recently became a unicorn, and they're now valued at like $2 billion. And it's sort of been touted as this success story, but in truth, it's kind of a situation where the CEO is holding something ridiculous like, I don't know, 80% or close to 100% of the shares. So his employees don't get any equity, and no one really benefits from that except him. So I think it's really good that HackerNoon has, the way that they chose to fund the first round was so inclusive of the audience that made use of the site, which I think really helped contribute towards its early stability and growth and support, especially during this kind of rocky transition period of Medium. It's really good that the people that are using it at the time are understanding, I would say.
Yeah, a lot of stuff broke. That was a little tough.
Gotta be gentle, but sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey, it's me, your podcast host and best friend. Are you ready to start investing in crypto? If so, I'm going to put a link in the description of this episode so you can earn $600 in rewards at Bybit. You're welcome. Back to the episode. Bye! So then what do you think was the hardest, most difficult phase of the startup that you experienced?
It's hard to say. I mean, in the beginning, it was... you got to pay rent. So like I was serving these marketing customers on the side, writing for people, doing their identity, and not being able to spend as much time on HackerNoon because it wasn't, it took 15 months to make the first dollar and we were bootstrapping for so long. So I think that stuff is hard. I'd say the hardest thing for me personally is not really any specific time. It's just when the downs are the downs, like the ride of sticking at something for years and growing it over time. There's just days that you feel like what you make is complete shit and it's crap. And you see some anecdotal evidence and you're just like, life is crap. I am crap. I make crap. And what you need to do is just wait, and you just wait 24 hours and someone is saying how great it is and how much they love you, and you find the right thing, and then it's all good again. But getting through that 24 or 48 hours when you feel that thing in the back of your mind that's like, oh, you could quit. You could just quit and get a 6-digit job. It wouldn't be that hard. And you're like, why am I grinding it out for this low wage? So there's some of that. And that still happens now. Like whenever, even though everything's much more stable, much more people relying on it, when I don't have fear when I leave the internet that it's going to break, I think it's going to keep growing. So there's, even now though, there's little things will just piss me off and I'll have a bad day. And I'll just say, why did I put my life on this? And then that day passes and then it's good. But that's probably the hardest thing. And that's more of like a me problem than a startup problem, I think.
Yeah. Well, like I think it's the ups and downs of work in general or life in general, and just almost combating like not an imposter syndrome, but like, I don't know, the self-doubt or the what ifs of the other side of the coin, I think. Yeah. Cool. And
also then in general, building a business that relies so heavily on search engine rankings can be a bit scary at times because, Google ships an update and then you're not sure what is responsible for changes in traffic.
I'm not really worried about the changes in updates. Like I can read from them, learn and adapt. I get more paranoid about like, what if this guy at Google just doesn't like me? At the level our site's at, we're getting reviewed at individual levels of how we should index. Like it's not just the algorithm. There are machines deciding what is HackerNoon, or humans deciding what is HackerNoon and how should we index them. Like people are debating that, so that's not, that part of it is where I get a little more scared.
Sure. Which is also why it's good then to branch out into these other sort of side avenues, take the Noonies or startups, for example, where we're serving the community on more than just a publishing platform.
Yes. So that's a great transition. I want to talk to you, Storm, about startups, which is a project that you just that you're working on and are just about to launch, right?
Right. Yeah.
So tell me more about your project that you're working on.
Well, I'd love to take credit for this, but this was actually David's idea. And it sort of came from the Noonies, because when we built the Noonies, we had the idea that we would have this sort of polling voting software that we could then package and use for other cases, or potentially even sell to other companies. So Startups is the first instance of the Noonies software where we took this and then had another idea for it, which was to essentially have a really large database of startups around the world, grouped by city, and then allow people to vote on which startups they thought were the best per region. So David, I don't know if you want to speak a bit more about that.
Yeah, we wanted to, because the Noonies, we learned that people kind of resonated more than brands, and the Noonies like fit with people. So we wanted to I wanted to look at saying, hey, let's make it just companies and look at how do we, rank just companies. And this voting, and we ended up settling on voting by location for a simple way to divide startups. And it's a little ironic as everyone moves to remote work, we're valuing the HQ, but it is a good way to recognize regions. So there's 4,000 cities in the world above 100,000 people. So I kind of put 100,000 people as a barrier of there's enough business activity that we can get some good companies to vote on. And we can give all these small companies, just being nominated for an award is not something that happens often for small companies. And winning an award is not something that happens either. And usually it's very predatory. You pay. I remember paying to get listed at my old company to win like some corporate blog event. And you have to pay to get listed, then pay to be able to use their logos. It's kind of a predatory industry. So having something that is actually offering benefits from sponsors and the social proof of the award and all of that, and giving these startups a third-party validation. In the early days, every single third-party site that talks about you is a big deal. And so I think we're going to tap into something here of giving all these startups something that they can use in all their marketing collateral. And it's going to be interesting because the voters can be located anywhere. So they're voting kind of objectively on, but they probably only care about the region if they only care about the region if they're in it. So I think we're going to see some interesting traffic trends of how this works by location. And it's going to be very worldwide and diverse. So I'm really excited for it. And like Storm said, it's a mini database. And now we have this graph of all these startups and where they're located. And now we're going to get social proof of what startups the community thinks will, grow or not grow. So I'm really excited for it. That's all
Yes.
So there's a certain level of pride when you know that a startup is from your city. So it'll be quite interesting. I'm trying to think of myself as a voter even, right? I'll of course browse my own city startups here in Munich and vote there. But then also I have an attachment to just certain startups in general, right, that are not based here. So I think that it should be really interesting to see what the voting trends are like and what startups are getting the most votes and where that traffic is coming from. If it's majority HackerNoon users, or if it's from the companies themselves promoting the award site. But what we found was from the Noonies was one that people really like to be unexpectedly nominated for an award, that they for some reason really value this sort of digital status, right? This kind of award for a particular thing, be it best writer.
The best time to give a gift? When it's unexpected. That's the best time.
Right.
I was going to say your birthday.
No, not your birthday. Unexpected time. That's the best time.
That's true. All right. I would love to learn more, Storm, about the development process behind this. How many months has this taken?
Luckily, the majority of the infrastructure had already been built with the Noonies. But like all internet technology these days, it was outdated the moment we shipped it, basically. So it's now been 2 years since the original Noonies was built. And while there were some upgrades last year to the system, the stack that the Noonies was built on has changed significantly. So for those who don't know, the Noonies was built on a GraphQL server through Apollo and hosted on a Heroku database that it was managed via Prisma. There's a lot of tech names that I've thrown in there, but the main thing is that some of those technologies are not really in use anymore or not supported anymore and have been deprecated, namely Prisma 1, which the Noonies was built on. And we're at a stage now where we've had to upgrade it. So we'll be looking at moving that to a different database system because we found that the hosting it with Heroku can be quite costly for us because Heroku charges for the number of records that we have. And you can imagine 4,000 cities, 30,000 to 50,000 startups to 100,000 can get quite expensive. So that's kind of where things are at now. But we'll be moving. But
when did you start doing this? Like aside from the things that you already had built with the Noonies?
It's been kind of a slow process. We started building it, I think, sometime the beginning of this year as a small side project. But all in all, it really didn't take all that much time. I would say maybe a few weeks of solid work.
Okay. There was a lot of data gathering around our end and sales, time frame, and also debate of like, is this the best next instance of it? Like voting on startups versus voting on podcasts versus voting on restaurants. Like obviously the startups is more closely tied to HackerNoon, but this is a good voting software, and we have weighted voting, we have authentication, we have spam prevention, and we give HackerNoon writers like higher weighted votes. So there's elements of like how to connect it to the existing base versus what if you just had this software and you could vote on anything. And we're HackerNoon, so we have a base. So we want to connect to our base in this situation. In the technology industry, like we've done a good job historically of leveling up the people actually doing the work. An engineer at Facebook can log in and publish a story, and a bunch of them have. But we haven't had great accountability for the brands or coverage for the brands. And these are the things this is deciding how the money is spent in the whole industry. You have the consumer side of it, but in terms of the supply, like covering the companies is something that I want to make a push at HackerNoon. And we did it a little bit with brand publishing, and we have customers who come in and republish their whole blogs with us. Then we did it a little more with a tech company news page where we use the Bing API to curate news around the web. And now we're saying, hey, what about the smallest companies? Who's rising up next? And instead of just hearing from the people making the companies, we're going to have the community vote on them and have a little bit of that third-party perspective. So I think it's going to make HackerNoon a more accurate reflection of what's going on in the tech industry.
Yeah, especially being a community voted affair, right? So these badges that will appear on companies' pages on HackerNoon, or even if that they use in their own material, will be completely community voted. So I think that's quite a good distinction from what you might otherwise expect, where maybe a company was awarded by a board of members who interests you are not really aware of.
Cool. So as a startup, when can I expect to receive my notification that I was nominated in my inbox?
It depends when we publish this podcast. I guess now. Maybe it's already there.
Okay.
Is soon a good answer?
Soon. Okay, so it's happening soon. And how long do people have to vote?
Through the end of the year. We'll announce an official date, but it's basically we're trying to go from now through the end of the year.
Okay, and where will this be hosted?
Startups.hackernoon.com. Startups.hackernoon.com.
Okay. Woohoo.
Insert sound effect.
That's not a .io. That's not a .edu.
Org.
No, it's a .com.
All right, cool. And I am very excited because in conjunction with launching the startups nominations, I am going to be interviewing a lot of different founders and CEOs of these startup companies over the summer, which I am coining the Summer Startup Series, everybody. So even though you have to vote, the ability to vote till the end of the year, over the summer, I will be interviewing a bunch of different CEOs and founders. So very excited about that and upcoming stuff for the podcast. And Storm, anything else that you're working on HackerNoon for an upcoming something?
Why, yes, Amy. As a matter of fact, we're in the middle of preparing the Noonies for this year, which now that we have startups will be a lot more user-focused, whereas previously the Noonies sort of incorporated both companies and users. The Noonies this year will be a lot more user-focused. So that's pretty exciting.
Excellent. And David, as the founder and CEO of HackerNoon, what do you think the future of HackerNoon will be?
Bigger.
Bigger, better, bolder, faster.
I mean, we want to keep this core of, publishing a lot of quality stories, doing more things to make the stories better, like GPT-3 headline generators, different text editors, markdown editors, more ways to read, more ways to choose your content. And because HackerNoon's a big library now, and most users don't care about a lot of the library. So, we've done a lot of features for readers to try and say, hey, how do I only get the type of content I want? So I think that's a really good thing, and we're going to work with brands more. I mean, we've published 300-400 brands with their corporate blogs, and hopefully we're going to be talking about 3,000 or 4,000. And because it's news, when a technology company makes an official statement, they've put a lot of labor into it, and they brought it in, and it's something that belongs on HackerNoon too. And hopefully we're building a lot more software, and we're spending most of our money on software now. So I also just I have to figure out how we're going to move all the software into more places, and how we're going to start to have more instances and interact with people, and keep HackerNoon as this core amazing place to read and write and reflect the whole technology industry. But that also means we have technologies that could help you. So hopefully, as we become more and more of a software company, people think HackerNoon.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining the podcast today. Storm, where can we find you and what you're working on online?
You can find me on Twitter @StormFarrell. That'd probably be the best place to keep up.
What about stormfarrell.com?
Yeah, you could also visit there, although I don't update that quite as much.
And how about startups.hackernoon.com? Startups.hackernoon.com.
Yes, inadvertently, you can find out what I'm working on there.
Yes. And David, where can we find you online?
It's spelled SMOOKE, davidsmook.net. That one's or hackernoon.com/u/davidsmook.
And how about your Twitter?
That one is actually Lingdalsmook. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Nice. Okay, great. Perfect. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the podcast. If you like this episode, don't forget to share it on all of the channels. Tell your friends. Get hyped for startups. And stay weird. And I'll see you on the internet. Goodbye.
Peace.
Ciao.